that was handled. In other words, yes, the Great Recession didn't become the Great Depression, and yes, there needed to be a fueling from the Fed into the financial system, but it was done in a way that was very favorable to Wall Street. It revived the banks, but none of the banks had to pay for their casino risky gambling. Some of the outright fraud that was involved in subprime mortgages, nobody, most they paid some fines, which on their scale was lunch money. The idea that as president you're surrounded by a finance team that is like a revolving door between Wall Street and DC is very problematic. And so Sanders says to Secretary Clinton, why don't you pledge to break that? And she won't make that pledge. Does that not concern you?
Not a bit. The issues around the financial collapse are actually very complex. And let's remember that they started well before President Obama took
Without
office.
question. A lot of it started during the presidency of Bill Clinton.
The policies of Alan Greenspan and President Bush led directly to the lack of regulation, which allowed Wall Street to commit flagrant violations in terms of their derivatives and their structures.
So you certainly acknowledge much of the deregulation began under President Clinton.
Well, Glass-Steagall went away under President Clinton.
Well, Glass-Steagall and also regulations to do with the Commodity Future Trading Commission.
We don't have to argue about it. What I can tell you is that, in the main, I believe that it was the Bush policies which allowed and Alan Greenspan's ideology, which really defanged the SEC and others and allowed the mortgage market to run wild. Be that as it may, I voted against TARP. I voted against the bailout, much to my mother's chagrin. And I did because I thought it was wrong to give the banks unfettered billions of dollars without any accountability.
Yeah, that was the point.
On the hope they'd pay it back when the real victims were small banks and homeowners. And I said, if we don't do anything for those folks, we're going to be in real trouble. And then moving forward on Dodd-Frank, I don't think there was enough in there.
Let me back up 1 second. When you voted against that, that's under great duress. People may not remember the kind of speeches that were going on, and like the apocalypse was going to rain down on your head because you voted against that.
Absolutely.
But that puts you on a somewhat different page. That's why I'm intrigued by this.
I was in a distinct minority at the time, and probably still am now, because many people say, look, the banks paid back all the money, weren't you wrong? And I say, I don't think so, because what I said at the time was, if Treasury doesn't do anything real for homeowners, this recession is going to be deeper and worse than it needs to be, and politically, it's going to be disastrous for Democrats, because with an interconnected world financial system where the priority was save the banks at all costs, I said, yeah, but what's going to happen to homeowners and the American economy is going to be really bad politically.
Yeah, millions of people's lives were destroyed.
It was terrible. And in fact, politically, we are now reaping the sorry benefit politically of what happened.
So I'm hearing like this guy who went against tremendous pressure to vote against TARP.
Absolutely.
But you're soft-selling what happened during the Clinton administration. Now because maybe you're out here playing surrogate.
No.
The deregulation to a large extent started there. Not just Glass-Steagall, Commodity Futures Trading Commission.
Wait a second, we're talking about what is needed and what's going to happen in the future. So whatever happened before and however we got there, the financial system...
Okay, well, let me talk today. I'll go back to my first question now.
The financial system came to the brink of collapse. The banks ultimately were bailed out. They paid back the money. The auto industry was bailed out.
Yeah, but how much of that payback the money from the banks was because they could borrow money from the Fed for practically nothing?
Well, what nobody...
And if you're paying back with 0% money, what's
nobody understands is that what Bernanke did was, in addition to TARP, and very quietly, and a lot of people aren't talking about it, he basically opened the Fed's coffers with what he calls quantitative easing, and allowed a huge money, and now the big banks have consolidated. So one of the reasons...
My point is, when they brag about getting paid back, how much of that paid back was because of quantitative easing? I mean, I'll pay you whatever you want. Give me free money,
absolutely.
I'll pay you back.
I'm still perfectly satisfied with my vote about TARP. I would have done the same thing again. You know, when I was a kid, I read a book by John Kennedy called Profiles in Courage about people whose political careers were shortened by votes that were tough votes. Well, that was probably the toughest vote that I had to take. The other tough vote was on health care, when I voted for what is now Obamacare. But that was a tough vote, which nobody gave me credit for. But that's okay. It was the right thing to do. But now, I don't think Dodd-Frank has gone far enough. And what I do think is that the issues about the regulations of our financial industry, which on the plus side, we need to have a vibrant financial industry in order for the flow of capital to support innovation. And on the minus side, we need to make sure that there are policies in place which protect people. So you've got the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, you've got other supposed safeguards in Dodd-Frank, but there need to be, I believe, more comprehensive regulations.
I mean, a lot of people think Dodd-Frank has turned into Swiss cheese.
Well, that's one of the reasons is because what people don't understand often about governance in our political system is Congress can say whatever it wants, and then ultimately a bill, which is generally written in very general language, is turned over to a cadre of lifetime regulators. Bureaucrats who are in the position in the regulatory agencies to write the actual rules.
And who are doing it sometimes, working with lobbyists who are 100, 200 to 1 Wall Street lobbyists. I talked to people from the Commodity Futures Trading Exchange when they're writing their new regulations. They were being lobbied anywhere from 100 to 200 to 1.
No argument.
And then they get blocked in the courts.
No argument.
So I'll go back to my question again. When you start doing this under the pressure and directly with Wall Street, this is what you get.
There's an entrenched system now of revolving doors between, actually you could look at congressional staff and the roles of Wall Street. And there is a revolving door, and there has been a revolving door between industry and the government for a long, long time. I think that Senator Sanders is a little simplistic in his approach to financial reform because there are good people and bad people in industry, there are good people and bad people in government. What I want to see is a president who has the experience and the judgment to pick good people with the right motives, and then to have a sufficient reign over them, to have sufficient controls to make sure that they're doing the right things.
I mean, listening to you, other than I know, I don't understand how you're actually not here as a Sanders surrogate. The kind of vote you took, the way you're talking about Wall Street, or I don't care if sports. I actually don't care if sports Sanders or somebody else.
Listen.
But Secretary Clinton, I mean, clearly you don't get paid millions of dollars in speaking fees unless they like what you say.
Have you seen what she said to Goldman Sachs? She was at Goldman Sachs talking about empowering women and the role of women. That's
It's not about what she said.
That's a sidelight.
It's not what she said. It's that you get their money.
Not important. What I think is important is taking a look at, although people are loath to actually take a look at what people are saying they want to do and their plans, as it happens, Secretary Clinton has a plan that I think is much more comprehensive about what to do with Wall Street. We don't have to get into the details, but the reason that I'm supporting Secretary Clinton is I think that Senator Sanders is a good messenger. He's gotten an effective message, and he's been able to create an enemy to go after, billionaires and Wall Street. That's great because it makes it convenient. But I think that when you dig down,
you don't think there's truth to it?
I think everybody agrees that there's too much money in politics. We agree, and we also agree that more regulation is needed of the financial system and the banking system. We agree. The question is, how do you get it done, and how do you get it done in a divided Congress? For my money, from what I have seen, I worked with Senator Sanders. He's from Vermont. I'm from New Hampshire. I like Senator Sanders. He's from Brooklyn. I'm originally from New York. I get it. He's like my grandmother, who was a socialist in the 1920s. I get it. I really get where he comes from. And I think Senator Clinton is better equipped at this time with the complexity of the situation to do what needs to be done.
There is a fundamental difference. Now, whether Sanders' policies are complex enough or go far enough, one can debate, and I actually think there are issues there. Breaking up the big banks in and of themselves doesn't solve it, especially if the same people winding up owning all the smaller banks anyway. That being said, There's an underlying thing, he's saying, which is concentration of ownership leads to concentration of political power. And you need to, it's a systemic class issue that needs to be addressed. Secretary Clinton's saying there's some bad apples, there's bad actors. Let's just control some bad actors. It's the same debate that's happening in police forces across the country, frankly. That, no, that, you can argue that police are a buffer between people that own stuff and people that don't. And if you don't deal with chronic poverty, you're not going to fix policing. Versus, oh, police are all good, they're all fine, there's just some bad actors control it. Except for decades and decades, official policy has been the bad actor theory, and nothing ever changes. Because it isn't just about a few bad actors. It's not, the devil made me do it and only a few people hear the devil and everyone else is okay. If I'm sitting there with the opportunity to make $1 zillion betting on subprime, and even my own company might get screwed, but I'm going to walk away with tons of fees, I'm going to do it. It's not about good and bad people.
Let's say this.
It's systemic.
Let's say this, that the problems with corporate culture in the United States are deep. And we need a new social compact between corporations and the American people, because it doesn't exist anymore, and it's been eroded over the past 30 or 40 years. It used to be that corporate ethos was about doing right by your employees and right by your community, which, by the way, was an American community, so that you then
hang on. Which
let me
corporations
finish.
were those?
So that you then make products and ship
You
them.
said the corporations didn't want to have fought against having seatbelts.
So we
the corporations that sold cigarettes.
So then we'd sell products overseas. And what I'm saying is, over the past 40 years, that's changed. And what we now have in general, at least as I see it, is a corporate culture which is at least on the multinational level, which is world market and doesn't owe much to the American people.
Why do you think that's happened?
Well,
I don't think there ever were such good old days. I will agree it's worse.
Yeah.
Why?
I think it's a combination of factors that have to do with policies that have led to globalization. I think especially in the 90s, I wasn't a fan of the trade policies of President Bill Clinton. It just wasn't where I saw us going. I don't think it did enough to keep jobs here and protect the environment and give us real clout.
Again, whenever I hear about your record, I don't quite understand why you're a Clinton supporter, but go on.
I'm absolutely a Clinton supporter.
I hear you.
I don't think she's Bill. I actually think she's quite different from Bill and has had a very different focus in her life.
Well, I don't want to keep going.
So, I mean,
why has it gotten worse?
Among those factors, I think that the rise of the digital age is not something people think about, but the way information flows now and the changes and advances in transportation, which made globalization and offshoring a much easier thing, combined with the policies that supported that, have led to what happens in a society where a capitalist economy is being controlled by a representative democracy. And those two, in many ways...
Really think it is?
Well, or trying to be controlled. So I'm saying, those two are in some ways anathema, because the market cares about profits, and only about profits. The representative democracy should care about people. And
but that ain't happening.
Well, it
we
should.
all know that.
But it needs,
maybe it should.
It should.
Can I give you another add to your piece? We know wages have been fundamentally stagnant since the early 70s.
Correct.
We know productivity has gone up continuously.
Yes.
And you've seen the graph. I mean, wages here, productivity like this. So where's all that going?
What's happening with fewer people?
So we know this is all going into the top 5, 10 percentile, mostly into the 1 percentile. Right. We saw those new numbers. Was it top 20, 25 billionaires have more money than the 50% of the population?
Yep. All those things.
So when you have that, you get two things. You get one, not enough demand in the economy because people don't have enough money to spend. And then in terms of what we're talking about, you have so much capital in so few hands, and there isn't enough productive places in terms of stuff that's really going to make stuff in the economy to invest in. So you gamble. So what is it? The derivatives market now is what, 23 times the size of global GDP? I mean, the amount of money that is essentially parasitical, not productive, and the influence of that in politics. And you didn't need Citizens United to do it. It just made it worse.
Was the icing on the cake.
It made it terribly worse.
Correct.
But you know, you've been on the Hill. You know, we're accredited journalists on the Hill. I mean, everyone is raising money 8 out of 10 hours a day. That's what people are worried about.
Believe me, I know all about it.
We know who's got the money.
I know all about it.
I've talked to trade union leaders, you know, and I say, why aren't you putting up more of a fight in the Democratic Party? For example, for the Employee Free Choice Act. You know, you were promised it, and now they control both houses, and nobody even talks about it anymore. Well, what are we going to do? Wall Street really doesn't want it, and they're the ones with the money. And when it comes time to fight the Republicans, you go to Wall Street. So even they kind of...
It's an unholy alliance between power and money.
So if you don't break up that ownership, if you don't create some kind of systems that are alternative to this parasitical finance, then nothing's going to change.
The question is how do we get there, and whether or not somebody who preaches a political revolution, number one, can get to office. And I don't think Bernie is electable. I think in 40...
Sure, it seems to be doing it here.
I think in 48 states, we're going to see something very, very different. But be that as it...
You may be right, although a lot of political calculations are changing, because he's only about 10 points behind nationally now. We'll see what happens. I agree with you. I mean, who knows? But let's say, because I guess what I'm saying is when people define the possible, as long as this is a representative democracy, and we'll see, because if things really significantly change, we'll see how long it remains really a representative democracy. It changes what's possible if public opinion actually gets behind some of these kinds of more significant reforms.
I appreciate the voice that Bernie Sanders has brought to the race. And I think he and Hillary Clinton actually share values, and share democratic values. And I think that the challenge that Democrats face is significant.
Excuse me one sec. We have someone sitting in our background here. Thank you. Go ahead.
After 8 years of a groundbreaking African-American Democratic president, having any Democrat elected again for another Democratic term is a real uphill battle, especially in a country that's as scared as this country. So that one of the things that I'm thinking about is who has the best chance of being elected.
Well, what do you make of the polling that's showing Sanders further ahead of Trump than Secretary Clinton?
You know, I've seen all kinds of polling. I never talk about all the polling, because polling is a snapshot in time. I really can't tell you. The polling in New Hampshire, there's been plenty of polling about what's going to happen tonight, and what I do know is that New Hampshire voters are fickle, and more than 34% of them, the polls said, are undecided on the Democratic side.
But there's an interesting thing happening here. We're hearing, and I'm hearing people talk about it on some of the other television networks, there are Trump voters on the edge of whether they're going Trump or Sanders.
Well, that's
but they
New
would
Hampshire.
never, no, my point is they say, I would never go Clinton. I'd actually consider going Sanders.
Yeah, but there are similar dynamics in play. Both are attacking the political system. And that's a great, Bernie Sanders would hate for me to say it's a similarity with Trump, but they're both talking about the problems of the political system, and it's true. Hillary Clinton is a candidate who says, we have a system. Example, we have Obamacare. It was a hard-fought health care bill. No, it's not good enough, and we need to do more. And Bernie Sanders is saying, we need a revolution, let's get rid of it and go to a single-payer system.
You know he's not saying that.
Well, that's essentially what he's been saying.
No way.
But that's what he's been saying.
No, it isn't. He's saying, take the Affordable Care Act, which I frankly think has so many weaknesses anyway, but whatever. Take the Affordable Care Act and transition to Medicare for all. He's not saying get rid of people's insurance. He's saying you build in some transition from the Affordable Care Act to getting rid of private insurance companies, moving to Medicare for all.
let's assume you're right, and that's what he's saying.
Well, he takes credit for helping write it.
Okay, so let's assume you're right, and we'll go with your theory. I still think he's wrong because I don't think that. While I was a big supporter of a government option, and
what happened to that? The public option.
Conservative Democrats. At the time, people forget that at the time in the House of Representatives, there was a huge cadre of blue dog Democrats, most of whom have now been replaced in the Tea Party tsunamis that followed by conservative Tea Party Republicans. And those blue dog Democrats nearly brought down the entire health care bill over two issues.
But why, if you're concerned about those guys, I'm meaning President Obama, do you appoint Baucus to head your Senate committee, who's clearly, they wouldn't even call anyone that supported single payer.
I thought we were talking about what Hillary or Bernie was going to do about health care.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to Hillary.
So the answer is, we needed the government option. I was disappointed we didn't get it. But my point is
But does she support it?
My point is, I did support it because...
Does she?
What?
Does Secretary Clinton support a public option?
She absolutely knows that there's a lot more to be done.
Does she support a public option?
As far as I know, she does.
Really? I go ask her, will you come out and say, bring back the public option to the Affordable Health Care Act? And she's going to say yes, because I haven't heard it.
Well, that's what I believe she supports.
Are you in contact with her? Find out.
Personally?
I think that'd be pretty good, but I haven't heard a word of it.
But what I'm saying, and I guess the larger point is this. From my years in Congress, and I wasn't there forever, I had the best 4 years that a Democrat has had in Congress in the past 22. I was in the majority. I was there to get Obama elected. And given the alternatives, let me just say that whatever your complaints or the progressive wing's complaints about Obama, he is what he always was, which I call a progressive centrist. And thank God that he's been there and done what he's done, because given the alternatives of a McCain-Palin presidency, let's face it, folks, this is what my people call a mitzvah. It's a really, really good thing. Yeah. So going forward in a different world, what I saw is that people would like to think that governance and issues are black and white. It's rarely the case. It's often a lot more gray. I never could vote for a bill, except one that I authored on health care reform early on, that I thought was all good. Every bill I voted on had stuff that I had to hold my nose on and vote for the good stuff in order to try to move the ball forward.
So just to end up, let's say Sanders things really takes off. Let's say there's tremendous public opinion in favor of Medicare for all. Let's say, and this is a lot of let's says and ifs.
It's okay.
Let's say perhaps even enough seats in Congress to do something. Is it the best policy? Would you like it?
I think
if it was doable.
What I think would be good would be something like it's probably a Swiss system of Medicare for all, or a basic health care package for all Americans, and a robust private insurance industry over and above that people could have access to.
You have a little bit of that in Canada, actually. Yeah. All right, thank you I enjoy this. Thank you very much. I hope we get to dance again.
You are a good questioner. You're good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Okay, I got some polling numbers. Let me see. Before you break, read this. Okay, I am going to read this before I break. And these poll numbers are from when? This is like, these are numbers of some kind of, is this like exit polls, or is this general polls? We don't know. They don't do exit polls in New Hampshire.
Not yet.
All right, this is just some kind of public opinion polls. Look at the Republicans. Kasich and Trump are tied. 24% each. That's very interesting, and we were starting to smell that, weren't we?
I knew that was coming.
I think it's the TV ads. I saw one of Kasich's TV ads, and it was very effective. It sounded, there actually is someone sane running in the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, New Hampshire moderates have come to the fore, finally, if this is true, and it's what I would expect. And frankly, Kasich is probably the candidate that Democrats should fear most.
Absolutely. This is someone that actually could give them a run for their money.
He has the experience and the temperament to make the country feel good.
Very interesting. Christie, Bush, everybody else, 8, 5, 5, 3, 3. Whereas Rubio's way down at 5, so he dumped, but didn't give Christie that much of a bump, but he's third if this is right, which I suppose gives them an argument to say I'm still alive. But isn't that interesting? In case it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's go look at Democrats. Well, if you're going to buy into the, well, you're not agreeing. We're not. Who knows what these are worth? At any rate, Sanders 61%, and Secretary Clinton, Hillary Clinton 32%, and somebody named Mark Greenstein 7%. Who the heck is Mark Greenstein? And he's got as many votes as almost as Chris Christie. Who is Mark Greenstein?
I have no idea who that is.
Who is Mark? Okay, I'm feeling very ignorant here. If anyone is a supporter of Mark Greenstein out there, please come on, tweet us. Come on, we'll interview you. You got as many votes as Chris Christie. You deserve an interview. Anyway, 61%. So before we wrap up, explain that. This is if these numbers are for real, even if they're close to for real, this ain't just because he's from a neighboring state.
Correct. If these,
this is 3 of 300 precincts, so this is
if
a slice.
It's hard to say, and it's hard. You can't say anything about it in terms of which precincts it is. You know, it's just hard. It's hard to say. After all, Dixville Notch voted at midnight here in New Hampshire, and they went 4-0 for Sanders. So that could be in these poll numbers.
Is your fundamental argument for Hillary that you think she's more likely to succeed and win? If you thought Sanders could succeed and win, would it change your mind?
I think Hillary Clinton's the right candidate for the Democratic Party and the right nominee. I really do think she has what it takes to succeed and win. Whoever the nominee is, what Democrats need to remember is whoever wins this in the end, and even if it's a long, hard-fought primary, the common foe is Republicans, because if Republicans are elected, whether it's Kasich, who's seen as more moderate, or any of the other more conservative and much more awful alternatives, America's in great trouble.
All right, thanks very much for joining us.
You bet.
We're going to go to Jessica Devereaux, who's live out there somewhere. And then we're going to have a bit of a break where we're going to show you some of the interviews and things we have done previously. But right now, live to Jessica. Where are you, Jessica?
So we're here in Manchester, New Hampshire at a field office for Senator Bernie Sanders, who, as you know, is running for president. I'm joined now by Paya, who has been out there canvassing and getting involved with the Bernie campaign. You can't quite vote yet because you're not 18.
No, I can.
Yes, but you are involved. And I want to ask you, what really resonates with you in terms of Senator Sanders' message?
I really like that he wants to reform the system. He wants campaign finance reform. He doesn't take any super PAC money. He supports women's rights. He supports Black Lives Matter. Those all really resonate with me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk about Black Lives Matter in particular. What about his proposals really attract you to him?
I really like that he wants to legalize marijuana so that there's less opportunity to discriminate against minorities with like the criminalization of it, because blacks and Hispanics are charged more with weed crimes than white people, even though they use it about the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk now about you being politically active, not even 18 yet. This momentum behind Senator Sanders, some people are going to say the youth being so behind him, and let's say he doesn't get the nomination, he has come out saying that he will support Secretary Clinton. Do you feel like if he does support Secretary Clinton, if you were able to vote, would you vote for her?
Probably, especially since I live in a purple state. Like, even though I don't support Secretary Clinton, I would prefer her to any of the Republican nominees. Mm-hmm. Like, she still supports Black people. She still supports women. Mm-hmm. And even though she doesn't support campaign finance reform, I don't think she would make the system a lot worse, like a lot of the other Republicans would.
Mm-hmm. And some people would say, though, you know, under President Clinton's watch, and he passes into law, the criminal justice reform in the 90s really adversely affected the African-American community. And the rise that we're seeing really in incarceration is due to a lot of those tough-on-crime policies that they both really advocated for. But at the end of the day, you said that would be better than having a Republican in the White House?
Yeah, I think that even if Bernie doesn't win, he does win a little because he is already pushing Hillary Clinton to the left. Like, she has called herself a moderate in the past, and now she's like pushing like, no, I'm a progressive, I'm a liberal, I'm gonna be tough on Wall Street, when she didn't say that before.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and good luck today.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, back to you, Paul, in the studio.
Try to get into the mind of Sanders through these quotations. And now joining us in the studio